She said, "I want a baby. Can you help?" And in that single moment, the ground beneath Nathan Cole's feet seemed to disappear. He had faced hospital bills he couldn't afford, sleepless nights with a feverish child in his arms, and the suffocating silence of an empty bed after his wife passed away. But nothing had prepared him for those words, spoken softly across a scratched wooden table in a small cafe in downtown Columbus, Ohio. Before we step into Nathan's story, take a second to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even broken hearts can build something beautiful again. Nathan was 34 years old, a mechanic with permanently grease-stained hands and tired blue eyes that had seen more grief than most men twice his age. 3 years earlier, his wife, Rebecca, had lost her battle with leukemia, leaving him alone to raise their 6-year-old son, Caleb. Columbus had never felt so large and so lonely. Every playground visit felt like a spotlight on his single status. Every school event reminded him of the empty seat beside him. Nathan loved his son fiercely. Caleb was his purpose, his reason to wake up before dawn and work double shifts at the auto shop near Broad Street. But love didn't erase exhaustion. It didn't quiet the nights when Caleb would ask why mommy couldn't come back from heaven just once to tuck him in. Nathan would hold his son tightly, swallowing tears in the dark, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. It was through Caleb's elementary school that Nathan met Hannah Brooks. She was the new school counselor, recently transferred from Chicago. Hannah had warm brown hair usually pulled into a loose bun and eyes that seemed to study people gently, as if she were reading chapters of their lives without judging the plot twists. At first, their conversations were brief, parent-teacher conferences, quick updates about Caleb adjusting well. But Hannah noticed things. She noticed the way Nathan always waited until every other parent had left before asking if Caleb seemed okay. She noticed how he carried guilt like a backpack too heavy for one shoulder. Months passed, and their polite exchanges grew into longer conversations. Sometimes about Caleb's drawings, sometimes about the grief that lingered like a shadow you couldn't quite outrun. Hannah never pried, but she listened. And for the first time since Rebecca's death, Nathan felt heard without being pitied. One rainy Thursday evening, Hannah asked if he wanted to grab coffee after a school fundraiser meeting. Nathan hesitated. It felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross. But something inside him, something tired of being alone, said yes. They sat in a quiet corner of a cafe overlooking the Scioto River. The rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. Nathan talked about Caleb's obsession with dinosaurs. Hannah spoke about her small apartment and her dream of someday having a home filled with laughter. Then, after a long pause that seemed to stretch between them like fragile glass, Hannah lowered her gaze and said she wanted a baby. Not someday. Now. She explained that at 32, after a painful breakup and a diagnosis of a medical condition that might make conception difficult in the future, she didn't want to wait for the perfect husband who might never arrive. She wanted to be a mother more than she wanted to be a bride. Nathan felt his pulse in his ears. He assumed she was explaining why she needed to rush into dating. But then she looked up at him, vulnerability shimmering in her eyes, and asked if he would consider helping her. Not as a husband, not as a romantic obligation, but as someone she trusted deeply, someone kind, someone who had already proven he knew how to love a child. The request felt enormous. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't reckless, it was raw and painfully honest. Nathan went home that night with his thoughts colliding like cars in his mind. Caleb was asleep when he walked in. He stood at his son's doorway for a long time, watching his small chest rise and fall. He remembered the day Caleb was born, the fear, the awe, the overwhelming promise that he would always protect him. Could he bring another child into the world? Could he share fatherhood in a way that wasn't tied to marriage? Would it confuse Caleb? Would it dishonor Rebecca's memory? The questions chased him into the early hours of the morning. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Hannah talked. Long walks through Goodale Park, honest conversations in the school parking lot after hours. Hannah didn't pressure him. She told him she would explore other options if he said no. She valued his friendship more than any answer. But something shifted inside Nathan. He began to see that life wasn't about replacing the past. It was about expanding the heart. Rebecca would never be replaced. Their love, their memories were etched into his soul. But grief didn't mean his capacity for love had expired. The hardest conversation was with Caleb. Nathan sat his son down on the living room couch one Sunday afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the carpet. He explained that Miss Hannah wanted to have a baby, that she might not have a husband, that sometimes families look different from what people expected. Caleb listened quietly, twisting the hem of his shirt. After a moment, he asked if the baby would need a dad. Nathan swallowed hard and said yes, every baby deserves someone who showed up. Caleb looked up at him with a seriousness that felt far older than his years, and said that if Miss Hannah was nice, and the baby needed help learning to ride a bike, then maybe they could help. That simple acceptance broke something open inside Nathan. Children understood love more clearly than adults complicated by fear. The decision wasn't easy, but it was intentional. They agreed on boundaries, on legal clarity, on shared responsibility. They sought counseling together to ensure they were choosing this for the right reasons. This wasn't a romantic fantasy. It was a commitment to co-parent with respect. Months later, when Hannah told Nathan she was pregnant, he felt the same rush of terror and wonder he had felt years ago in a hospital room holding Rebecca's hand. But this time, there was also healing. The news didn't erase his grief. It layered hope on top of it. Columbus in the spring felt different that year, softer, brighter. Caleb began talking to Hannah's growing belly as if the baby could already hear him. He drew pictures of stick-figure families with 4 smiling faces. He told his classmates he was going to be a big brother in a special way. When baby Grace was born on a crisp October morning at Riverside Methodist Hospital, Nathan stood beside Hannah, not as her husband, but as her partner in something sacred. When Grace wrapped her tiny fingers around his, he realized that love wasn't limited by traditional labels. It was defined by presence. Life didn't magically become simple. There were exhausting nights again, shared schedules, moments of misunderstanding, whispers from people who didn't understand their arrangement. But there was also laughter, birthday parties in Hannah's small house in Clintonville, movie nights where Caleb insisted on holding his sister during the scary parts, even though she was too young to notice. Nathan learned that love after loss wasn't betrayal, it was bravery. He still visited Rebecca's grave every year on her birthday. He still told Grace about the woman who had made him a father for the first time, and Hannah never felt threatened by that. She honored it, because what they built wasn't rooted in jealousy. It was rooted in trust. One evening, nearly a year after Grace's birth, Nathan sat on a park bench watching Caleb chase pigeons while Hannah rocked Grace in her arms. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The path hadn't been conventional. It hadn't been easy. But it had been honest. And in that honesty, Nathan found a new version of himself. Not just a widower surviving, but a father expanding. A man willing to say yes to life again. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes family is built on love, and subscribe for more stories that remind us why compassion matters. And before we close, I have one small request. Comment the word hope below if you believe that second chances can create the most unexpected blessings. Because sometimes the most surprising requests lead to the most beautiful answers. And sometimes, when someone says, "I want a baby, can you help?" what they're really asking is, do you believe love can grow in a new direction? Nathan did, and because he did, 2 children grew up knowing that family isn't about how it begins. It's about who stays.